Welcome to Storytales. Please like this video and subscribe to Storytales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The fluorescent lights of Walmart buzzed overhead as Daniel Carter completed his final walkthrough of the evening shift. His worn leather shoes squeaked against the freshly mopped floor as he made his way through the aisles, checking on his team members as they restocked shelves and prepared for the night crew. "Great job with the seasonal display, Mike," Daniel called out to a young employee arranging Halloween decorations. The boy's face lit up at the praise, and Daniel felt a familiar warmth in his chest. This was why he'd stayed at Walmart for 15 years, not just for the steady paycheck, but for the sense of purpose that came from mentoring his team. His phone vibrated in his pocket. Another missed call from Sandra. She'd been increasingly distant lately, barely acknowledging him when he left for work in the morning or came home at night. Their 20th anniversary was approaching, and Daniel had been working extra shifts for months to save up for the diamond earrings she'd pointed out during their last mall trip. "Mr. Carter?" Jessica, one of the checkout supervisors, approached with a concerned look. "There's a customer asking for a manager. She's pretty upset about a return." Daniel nodded, already moving toward the front of the store. "I'll handle it. You focus on getting your team ready for shift change." The customer, a middle-aged woman with a cart full of open electronics, was red-faced and shouting at the returns desk clerk. Daniel stepped in smoothly, his voice calm and professional as he defused the situation. 15 minutes later, the woman left satisfied, and Daniel had preserved both store policy and customer goodwill. "That was impressive," a voice said behind him. Daniel turned to find Marcus Williams, the regional director, standing there with an approving smile. "Not many managers can handle difficult customers that well." "Just doing my job, sir," Daniel replied, straightening his name badge. Marcus shook his head. "You do more than that, Daniel. I've been reviewing your performance records. Your department has the highest efficiency ratings in the region, and your employee satisfaction scores are off the charts." Pride warmed Daniel's chest, but he deflected the praise. "I have a great team." "A team you built and trained," Marcus countered. "Have you ever considered moving up to regional management? With your skills, Daniel?" A sharp voice cut through their conversation. Sandra stood near the entrance, designer purse clutched in her manicured hands, her expression a mixture of embarrassment and disgust. "Sandra," Daniel checked his watch, surprised to see his wife at the store. "Is everything okay?" She strode toward them, her heels clicking against the linoleum. "I've been calling you for an hour. Emma needs her credit card paid off by tomorrow for a spring break deposit. And you're here chatting about stocking shelves?" Daniel felt his face flush as Marcus raised an eyebrow. "I'm sorry. I was handling a customer situation." "Sandra, this is Marcus Williams, our regional director." "Marcus, my wife Sandra." Sandra barely glanced at Marcus, her lip curling slightly. "Charming. Daniel, we need to go. Now." "Of course," Daniel said quickly. "Marcus, thank you for the feedback. I'll think about what you said." Marcus nodded, his expression thoughtful as he watched Sandra practically drag Daniel toward the exit. As they reached the parking lot, Sandra released his arm with a sound of disgust. "I can't believe you made me come to this place," she hissed. "Do you have any idea how humiliating it is? My coworkers saw me walking in." "I'm sorry," Daniel said automatically, reaching for his wallet. "How much does Emma need?" $3,000. Sandra's voice dared him to object. "She's going to Cancun with her friends. All the other parents already paid." Daniel's heart sank. He'd been saving that amount for Sandra's anniversary gift. "I thought we agreed Emma would get a part-time job if she wanted extra spending money." Sandra's laugh was cold. "A job? Like yours, you mean? Standing around in a polyester vest dealing with coupon-clipping housewives? No daughter of mine is going to work retail." "There's nothing wrong with honest work," Daniel protested, but Sandra was already walking to her BMW, a car he'd bought her last year by taking out a second mortgage on their house. "Just transfer the money, Daniel. And don't embarrass me by coming to my office again. Andrew noticed your Walmart badge last time, and I had to make up some excuse about you delivering something." Andrew Sullivan, Sandra's CEO boss. Something in Daniel's chest tightened at the mention of his name, but he pushed the feeling aside. Sandra climbed into her car without another word, leaving Daniel standing alone in the parking lot, the weight of his wedding ring suddenly heavy on his finger. Later that night, after transferring the money to Emma's card, Daniel sat in his home office reviewing their financial statements. The numbers told a stark story. Credit card debt mounting, savings depleted, retirement accounts dwindling. All to maintain the lifestyle Sandra demanded. To give Emma the things her friends had. A text message lit up his phone. Money received. Whatever. Don't expect a thank you. Emma. Daniel stared at the message, remembering the little girl who used to run to him with skinned knees and broken toys, trusting her daddy to fix everything. When had she become this cold stranger who saw him only as a walking ATM? The sound of Sandra's car pulling into the driveway drew his attention. It was past midnight late, even for her usual work dinners. Through the office window, Daniel watched her step out of a car he didn't recognize, a black Mercedes with tinted windows. She was laughing, her head thrown back, and for a moment, Daniel saw the woman he'd fallen in love with 20 years ago. Then the driver's window rolled down, revealing Andrew Sullivan's distinctive profile. Sandra leaned in, their silhouettes merging in what could only be a kiss. Before she practically floated to the front door, Daniel sat in the darkness of his office, his world tilting on its axis, as his wife's key turned in the lock below. The next morning, Daniel went through the motions of his daily routine, the image of Sandra kissing Andrew burning behind his eyes. He waited for her to mention it, to offer some explanation, but she barely acknowledged his presence as she got ready for work. "I'll be late tonight," she announced, applying another coat of lipstick in the hallway mirror. "Board meeting." The lie fell easily from her lips, and Daniel wondered how many other board meetings had been spent with Andrew Sullivan. "Actually," he said quietly, "I thought we could talk. It's important." Sandra's hand paused, her eyes meeting his in the mirror. Something flickered across her face. Fear? Guilt? Before her expression hardened. "I don't have time for this, Daniel. Some of us have real jobs to get to." The front door slammed behind her before he could respond. Daniel called in sick to work for the first time in his career, spending the morning in a daze. He found himself in Emma's room, looking at old photographs. His daughter's face smiled up at him from various stages of her life: gap-toothed elementary school pictures, awkward middle school years, recent glamour shots that made her look older than her 19 years. That a leather-bound book caught his eye, partially hidden under Emma's bed. Her diary. Daniel had never invaded his daughter's privacy before, but something compelled him to open it now. The latest entry made his blood run cold. "Mom says everything's arranged. Andrew's already lined up an amazing internship for me, and he says I can have any car I want once the divorce is final. Thank God I won't have to pretend to respect Dad anymore. It's so embarrassing when my friends find out what he does for a living. Mom says Andrew's lawyers will make sure Dad can't cause any problems. I can't wait to start my real life." The words blurred as Daniel's hands began to shake. The diary entries went back months, each one more cruel than the last. Emma complained about having to play nice with him to keep getting money. She mocked his attempts to connect with her, calling him pathetic and desperate. She gloated about expensive gifts from Andrew, secret shopping trips with Sandra, plans for their new life together. Daniel was still sitting there when Emma came home from her college classes. She froze in the doorway, seeing the diary in his hands. "How dare you?" she shrieked, snatching the book away. "That's private." "Private?" Daniel's voice was eerily calm. "Like your mother's private meetings with Andrew Sullivan?" Emma's face went white, then red. "You know, I saw them last night, but according to your diary, this has been going on for months. You and your mother, plotting behind my back, taking my money while planning to leave me." "Oh my God." Emma rolled her eyes, her momentary shock replaced by contempt. "Are you seriously playing the victim? What did you expect? Look at yourself, a pathetic Walmart manager living in this boring house in this boring neighborhood. Mom deserves better." "I deserve better. I gave you everything I had," Daniel said, standing slowly. "Every penny I earned went to your designer clothes, your spring break trips, your credit cards. I worked overtime, holidays, weekends also. You could have opportunities one never had." "Opportunities?" Emma laughed harshly. "What opportunities? Community college? A job at Walmart like you? That's not opportunity, Dad. That's settling for mediocrity. Andrew's getting me into an Ivy League school. He's giving me an internship at a real company. He's successful, powerful everything you're not. The sound of the front door opening interrupted them. Sandra's voice called up the stairs. Emma? Is everything okay? I got your text. Emma smirked at Daniel. Perfect timing. Mom, Dad knows. Sandra appeared in the doorway, and Daniel noticed she was wearing the same clothes as yesterday. She'd never come home last night. Her expression shifted from surprise to resignation to cold determination. Well, she said, crossing her arms. I suppose this saves us the trouble of breaking it to you gently. Gently? Daniel's laugh held no humor. Like how gently you've been sleeping with your boss. How gently you've been turning our daughter against me. Don't be crude, Daniel, Sandra sniffed. Andrew and I have a connection you couldn't possibly understand. He's sophisticated, ambitious, he sees my true worth. Your true worth? Daniel gestured around them. And what about our life together? 20 years of marriage, raising our daughter, building a home. Building what? Sandra's voice rose. A prison of mediocrity? I'm 40 years old, Daniel. I live in a house that would fit in Andrew's guest wing. I drive a car that his cleaning lady would be embarrassed to own. Every day, I have to watch other women at the company living the life I deserve. All because I was foolish enough to marry a man with no ambition. Emma moved to stand beside her mother, their matching expressions of disdain like a physical blow to Daniel's chest. Sandra continued, her words precise and cutting. Andrew's asked me to move in with him. He's already arranged everything: lawyers, divorce papers, new accounts. Emma will have a trust fund, a real education, everything we should have had years ago. Everything you should have had. Daniel's voice was dangerously quiet. I gave you everything I had. Every dream, every dollar, every moment of my life was dedicated to making you both happy. That's the problem. Emma burst out. Your dreams are so small. A management position at Walmart? A house in the suburbs? God, it's pathetic. Andrew says I have real potential. He says with the right connections, the right opportunities. Daniel cut her off. You mean sleeping with your mother's boyfriend? Don't look so shocked. I read your diary, remember? All those secret meetings, all those expensive gifts. What exactly did Andrew expect in return? Sandra's hand cracked across his face, the slap echoing in the sudden silence. How dare you? Emma, go pack your things. Now. Emma practically ran to her room, leaving Daniel and Sandra alone. For a long moment, they stared at each other, 2 decades of shared life crumbling between them. I want a divorce, Sandra said finally. Andrew's lawyers will be in touch. Don't try to fight it, Daniel. You'll only embarrass yourself more than you already have. The sound of Emma's closet doors slamming and drawers being yanked open filled the house. Sandra turned away, her voice cold and final. I'll send someone for the rest of our things tomorrow. Consider this your notice. Your perfect little life is over. Try not to make it harder than it needs to be. Daniel stood in the doorway of his empty house, watching the black SUV disappear around the corner. Sandra's wedding ring lay where she dropped it, a small gold circle catching the last rays of sunset. He couldn't bring himself to pick it up. Inside, the house felt cavernous. Emma's room was a disaster of empty drawers and discarded memories, photo albums thrown aside. Childhood stuffed animals kicked under the bed. A Father's Day card from her 10th birthday crumpled in the trash. In their bedroom, Sandra's closet gaped open, designer clothes gone, leaving only the modest outfit she'd worn when they first met, the weight of 2 decades pressed down on Daniel's shoulders as he moved through the house. Every room held memories now tainted by betrayal. The kitchen where he'd taught Emma to bake cookies. The living room where Sandra had once curled against him during movie nights. The backyard where they'd celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, dreams, all lies. Daniel found himself in his home office, surrounded by the modest achievements of his life. Employee of the Month certificates, community college degree, training certificates from Walmart's management program. His eyes fell on a framed photo of Sandra and Emma at last year's Christmas party. They were both laughing, but now he could see the contempt hidden behind their smiles. The whiskey bottle beckoned from his desk drawer. Daniel pulled it out, poured a glass, but couldn't bring himself to drink. The amber liquid caught the light, reminding him of Sandra's eyes when she'd first told him she loved him. Another line, his phone buzzed a text from Emma. Movers will come tomorrow at 10. Don't be there. We don't want to see your face. The words blurred as Daniel's eyes burned. He'd given them everything, every spare dollar, every moment of his time, every beat of his heart. And they'd spent years plotting behind his back, taking his sacrifices while mocking him to his face. The phone buzzed again. Marcus Williams, the regional director. Daniel, wanted to follow up on our conversation about advancement opportunities. You have real potential. Let's discuss your future. Future. The word echoed in Daniel's mind. Sandra and Emma thought they knew his worth, had judged him based on his job title and bank account. They saw him as nothing more than a stepping stone to a better life, their better life with Andrew Sullivan. That Daniel's hand clenched around the whiskey glass. With sudden clarity, he hurled it against the wall, watching it shatter. The sound was satisfying, a physical representation of his breaking point, and oh more, that he wouldn't drink himself into oblivion like they probably expected. He wouldn't crumble and beg for them to come back. He wouldn't remain the mediocre man they'd judged him to be. Daniel sat down at his computer, his fingers hovering over the keyboard for a moment before he began to type. First, a resignation email to his supervisor at Walmart. He'd given 15 years of his life to the company, working his way up from stock boy to floor manager. But Sandra was right about one thing: he'd grown too comfortable, too content with steady progress and modest goals. Next, he pulled up local business programs and entrepreneurship courses. The community college offered night classes in business administration, but Daniel scrolled past them. He'd aim higher university programs, accelerated courses, anything that could give him the knowledge he needed to build something of his own. His savings account balance mocked him barely enough for 2 months of bills after years of funding Sandra and Emma's extravagant lifestyle. Daniel opened another tab, searching for properties he could sell, assets he could liquidate. The house would have to go. Too many memories haunted these walls anyway. He could find a small apartment, live on the bare minimum while he rebuilt his life. The sun was rising by the time Daniel finally looked up from his research. His eyes burned from staring at the screen, but his mind was clearer than it had been in years. He had a plan now, rough but forming. The jewelry store opened at 9. He'd return Sandra's anniversary earrings, adding that money to his new future fund. The real estate agent who'd sold them this house owed him a favor. She'd help him get it on the market quickly. Daniel stood and walked to the bathroom, staring at his reflection in the mirror. The face that looked back at him was tired but determined. Sandra had called him a man without ambition. Emma had labeled him a loser. Andrew Sullivan had seen him as an easily discarded obstacle, that they'd all made the same mistake, confusing kindness for weakness, mistaking his devotion to family for lack of ambition. Daniel Carter wasn't weak. He wasn't mediocre. He'd given his heart and soul to 2 people who'd thrown it away, but that didn't make him a failure. It made them fools. His phone buzzed again, another text from Emma. Mom says make sure you leave the BMW keys. It's technically her car anyway, since you only bought it because she demanded it. Daniel deleted the message without responding. Let them think they'd broken him. Let them imagine him drowning his sorrows, wallowing in self-pity. Let Andrew Sullivan believe he'd won, that he'd taken everything Daniel had, that they'd learn the truth soon enough. The morning light streamed through the windows as Daniel began clearing his office, shredding old documents and filing away anything he'd need for the divorce proceedings. Each motion felt like shedding an old skin, revealing something stronger underneath. Sandra and Emma had chosen their path, a life built on betrayal and materialism, tied to a man who saw people as possessions to be bought and discarded. Daniel chose a different path. He would rebuild himself, not for revenge, not to win them back, but to become the man he should have been all along. Success wouldn't be measured in designer labels or luxury cars, but in the empire he would build from the ashes of his old life. The movers would come at 10, just as Emma had demanded. They'd find an empty house. Daniel would be long gone by then, taking only what he truly needed. Let them have the furniture, the artwork, the carefully curated trappings of the life Sandra had deemed so inadequate. Daniel Carter had different treasures to acquire, different battles to fight. The war for his family's love was over. He'd lost that the moment Sandra had chosen wealth over loyalty, the instant Emma had traded her father's devotion for a sugar daddy's promises. But the war for his own soul? That battle was just beginning. The first rays of sunlight painted the suburban street gold as Daniel loaded a single suitcase into his old Honda Civic. The neighbors were starting to emerge, heading to their jobs, living their comfortable lives. Once he'd thought that was enough stability, routine, the quiet satisfaction of providing for his family. Now he knew better. The world was bigger than this street, this neighborhood, this small-town life. Sandra and Emma wanted to be part of Andrew Sullivan's world of wealth and power? Fine. Daniel would build his own world, one founded on integrity and true strength rather than manipulation and greed. He backed out of the driveway for the last time, leaving Sandra's wedding ring where it had fallen. Let it lie there, a small golden monument to broken promises and shattered dreams. Daniel Carter drove away from his old life without looking back, his heart heavy, but his spirit unbroken. The betrayal that should have destroyed him would instead become his foundation. From this pain, he would forge something new, not just success, but redemption, not just wealth, but wisdom, not just power, but purpose. The sun climbed higher in the sky as Daniel merged onto the highway, leaving behind the mediocre man his wife and daughter had betrayed. Ahead lay uncertainty, challenge, and change, but also opportunity, strength, and destiny. Daniel Carter wasn't running away. He was moving forward. 6 months after leaving his old life behind, Daniel Carter sat in a university classroom, his laptop open to a business plan that would change everything. The professor's words echoed in his mind. Innovation isn't about creating something new. It's about solving problems others haven't recognized yet. Mr. Carter, Professor Richardson's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Would you share your sustainable energy proposal with the class? Daniel stood, moving to the front of the room with quiet confidence. Gone were the khakis and polo shirts of his Walmart days, replaced by a crisp button-down and well-fitted slacks, not designer clothes, but professional, purposeful. The problem isn't just fossil fuel dependency, Daniel began, pulling up his presentation. It's the infrastructure. Small businesses and residential areas can't afford the current solar conversion costs. My company, Carter Innovations, will change that. A hand shot up. Your company? You're just a student. Daniel's smile held an edge. I've already secured initial funding and filed the patents. While you're all planning hypothetical businesses, I'm building a real one. After class, Professor Richardson called him aside. Daniel, I'm impressed. Most career change students take years to find their footing, but you've accomplished more in 6 months than many do in 6 years. I had good motivation, Daniel replied, gathering his materials. About that, Richardson hesitated. Marcus Williams stopped by my office. He mentioned you used to work for him at Walmart. Daniel's expression remained neutral. That's right. He also mentioned certain personal circumstances that led to your career change. Listen, Daniel, revenge isn't a sustainable business model. This isn't about revenge, Daniel said quietly. This is about proving something to myself. Whether certain people learn a lesson from that proof is incidental. The professor studied him for a moment. Well, whatever your motivation, your proposal has merit. The sustainable energy sector is booming, but the current players are all focused on large-scale projects. Your small-scale solution could fill a crucial gap. That's the plan. Daniel checked his watch. If you'll excuse me, I have a meeting with potential investors. The meeting was at Marcus Williams' private office, not at Walmart headquarters, but in a sleek downtown building that housed his personal investment firm. Daniel had been surprised to learn that his former regional director had a side business in venture capital. Daniel, Marcus greeted him warmly, gesturing to the impressive view of the city skyline. Quite different from the fluorescent lights of retail, isn't it? Life changes quickly, Daniel replied, setting up his presentation materials. That it does. Marcus's expression grew serious. I've reviewed your proposal thoroughly. The technology is solid, the market research is comprehensive, and your business plan is exceptional. But I have to ask, are you sure you're ready for this? Building a company from scratch isn't like managing a Walmart department. Daniel met his gaze steadily. 6 months ago, my wife and daughter told me I was nothing but a mediocre retail manager. They left me for a man who promised them luxury and status. I've spent every waking moment since then preparing for this moment. And if you fail, then I'll fail knowing I tried. But I won't fail, Marcus. I've discovered something about myself these past months. I'm not afraid of hard work or challenges. What I was afraid of was disrupting the comfortable life I thought I had. Now that that illusion is shattered, I have nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Marcus nodded slowly. Well, you've convinced me. And more importantly, you've convinced my investment partners. We're prepared to offer you seed funding of $5 million for a 30% stake in Carter Innovations. Daniel's heart raced, but his voice remained calm. 20% stake. I need to maintain controlling interest. 25%, and we provide office space in this building plus access to our network of industry contacts. Done. They shook hands, the deal sealed with that simple gesture. As Daniel packed up his materials, Marcus spoke again. You know, I heard through the grapevine that Andrew Sullivan's company is struggling. Something about failed international contracts and regulatory issues. Daniel paused. Is that so? Just thought you might find it interesting, especially since your proposed target market overlaps with several of his company's key territories. A slight smile crossed Daniel's face. Pure coincidence, I assure you. Of course. Marcus chuckled. By the way, have you heard from them? No. Daniel's voice was flat. And I don't expect to. They made their choice, Marcus. Now I'm making mine. Later that night, in his modest apartment, Daniel reviewed the investment contract. His tiny living space was spartanly furnished, just a bed, a desk, and walls covered in whiteboards filled with plans and calculations. He'd sold everything else, pouring every penny into his education and business preparation. His phone buzzed an email notification. The subject line made his breath catch, urgent from Emma Carter. Daniel's finger hovered over the delete button, but something made him open it. Dad, things aren't what we thought with Andrew. Mom won't listen to me. I need your help, please, Emma. Daniel stared at the screen for a long moment before hitting delete. They'd thrown him away like garbage, choosing Andrew Sullivan's false promises over his genuine love. Whatever problems they were facing now were their own to solve. He turned back to his contract, his mind already racing with next steps. Tomorrow, he'd start building his team. He'd need engineers, developers, marketing experts, people who shared his vision of revolutionizing sustainable energy access. The city lights twinkled beyond his window as Daniel worked late into the night. Somewhere out there, Sandra and Emma were living their chosen life in Andrew Sullivan's mansion. Let them enjoy their luxury while it lasted. Daniel Carter was about to change the game, and this time, he was playing for keeps. 1 year later, the Carter Innovations headquarters buzzed with energy as Daniel strode through the open office space. Engineers huddled over prototype solar panels. Marketing teams debated campaign strategies, and the sales department celebrated another record-breaking quarter. Mr. Carter, Jennifer, his executive assistant, hurried to keep pace with him. The Reuters reporter is waiting in your office for the interview about the Forbes 30 Under 40 feature. Cancel it, Daniel said, checking his tablet. Something more important just came up. Get me Marcus Williams on the line. Jennifer raised an eyebrow, but nodded. In the past year, she'd learned that Daniel's instincts were rarely wrong. Within minutes, Marcus's face appeared on Daniel's office screen. Daniel, Marcus greeted him. I assume you've seen the news about Sullivan Industries? Just hit the wire. Daniel pulled up the financial report. Their stock dropped 60% after the failed Asian expansion. But that's not the interesting part. Look at their domestic holdings. Marcus leaned forward. The sustainable energy division. They're hemorrhaging clients because their technology is outdated and overpriced. Daniel's smile held no warmth. Our small-scale solar solutions are half the cost with double the efficiency. We've been stealing their market share for months, and now they're vulnerable. Marcus studied him. What are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time for a hostile takeover. Sullivan Industries' board is already nervous. Another quarter like this, and they'll be looking for new leadership. Daniel, Marcus hesitated. You know Andrew Sullivan still owns controlling interest. And given your history with him, this isn't personal. Daniel cut him off. It's business. Sullivan Industries has valuable patents and distribution networks. Acquiring them would accelerate our expansion plans by years. And the fact that it would destroy the man who stole your family has nothing to do with it. Daniel's laugh was cold. They weren't stolen, Marcus. They chose him. Now they can watch him fall. Across town, in Andrew Sullivan's mansion, that fall was already having devastating consequences. Sandra paced the marble floors of the master bedroom, her designer outfit hanging loose on her too-thin frame. "You promised this wouldn't happen," she shouted at Andrew, who stood by the window, drink in hand. "You said Carter Innovations was nothing, just a small startup that would fail in months." Andrew hurled his glass against the wall, making Sandra flinch. "Shut up. That bastard somehow got his hands on classified research data. He knew exactly which markets to target, which technologies to develop. He's been systematically destroying my company. Maybe if you spent less time drinking and more time actually running your business." The slap echoed through the room. Sandra stumbled backward, hand to her reddened cheek, as Andrew advanced on her. "You think you can talk to me like that?" he snarled. "After everything I've given you? The clothes, the cars, the lifestyle you so desperately wanted?" "Don't touch her." Emma appeared in the doorway, her face pale but determined. At 31, she looked older than her years, stress and fear etching lines around her eyes. That Andrew's attention shifted to Emma, his expression changing in a way that made Sandra's stomach turn. "Well, if it isn't my favorite stepdaughter. Come to defend Mommy, dearest?" "Leave her alone," Sandra whispered, but her voice held no real strength. They both knew the truth. They were trapped. Andrew's money controlled everything. The house, the cars, their credit cards. And now, with his company failing, the board meeting didn't go well? Emma asked carefully, trying to redirect his anger. Andrew laughed bitterly. "Those vultures are circling. Carter Innovations has been undercutting us at every turn. Our major clients are jumping ship. And now," he grabbed another bottle from the bar, "now there are rumors of a hostile takeover." Sandra's head snapped up. "Daniel? Daniel is trying to take over your company." "Daniel?" Andrew mimicked her tone mockingly. "Still thinking about your ex-husband? The man you called mediocre? Well, your mediocre ex is now worth billions. His company is revolutionizing the industry while mine crashes and burns. Happy now?" Emma caught Sandra's eye, a silent message passing between them. They'd made a terrible mistake, choosing Andrew's wealth and status over Daniel's honest love. But it was too late for regrets. They were in too deep, with too many dark secrets between them. "I have a board meeting tomorrow," Andrew continued, his voice slurring slightly. "Those cowards are probably plotting against me already. Emma, you'll come with me. Show them I still have family support." "I have classes," Emma protested weakly. That Andrew's hand shot out, gripping her arm. "Wasn't I clear? You owe me, Emma. Or should I remind you of all the things I've done for you? All the things we've done together?" Sandra turned away, shame burning in her chest. She'd known about Andrew's advances toward Emma, had even encouraged her daughter to comply to maintain their lifestyle. What kind of mother was she? Later that night, after Andrew had passed out in his study, Emma found Sandra in the kitchen. "Mom," she whispered, glancing nervously at the doorway. "We have to get out of here. He's getting worse. The company's failing. And he's drinking more. And go where?" Sandra interrupted. "We have nothing, Emma. No money, no jobs, no skills. We gave up everything for this life. We chose this. We could—" Emma swallowed hard. "We could try to contact Dad." Sandra's bitter laugh held no humor. "Daniel? The man we mocked and betrayed? The man who's now systematically destroying Andrew's company? Why would he help us? Because despite everything, he's a good man. Better than we ever deserved." "No." Sandra's voice was firm. "We made our bed, Emma. Now we have to lie in it. Whatever Daniel's doing with Andrew's company, we have no right to ask him for anything." Neither woman noticed the small red light blinking on Andrew's hidden security camera, recording their conversation for his later viewing. In his drunken paranoia, he'd installed them throughout the house, watching their every move, documenting their fear and desperation. The next morning, as Andrew dragged Emma to his board meeting, Sandra sat alone in the massive house that had once seemed like a dream come true. Now it felt like a prison, its luxury a mockery of the comfortable home she'd shared with Daniel. She opened her laptop, her trembling fingers typing Carter Innovations into the search bar. The results made her breath catch. Daniel's company was everywhere, news articles praising his innovative technology, business magazines highlighting his meteoric rise, charity foundations thanking him for his generous donations, and there he was in a recent photo at a tech conference. He looked different, confident, powerful, but still with that underlying kindness in his eyes that had once made her fall in love with him. The article quoted him, "Success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right." Sandra closed the laptop, tears falling freely now. They called him mediocre, mocked his honest work, thrown away his love for Andrew's false promises. Now Daniel was a rising star in the business world. While they lived in fear of Andrew's violent mood swings and drunken rage's karma, it seemed, had a sense of irony. The Sullivan Industries boardroom crackled with tension. Andrew Sullivan sat at the head of the table, his usual polished appearance showing signs of strain. His tie hung slightly askew, and dark circles shadowed his eyes as he watched his board members shuffle through the latest financial reports. "This is unacceptable," Gerald Morrison, the lead director, broke the silence. "Our market share has dropped 70% in 6 months. Carter Innovations isn't just beating us, they're systematically dismantling our entire operation." "It's a temporary setback," Andrew insisted, his knuckles white around his glass of water. "Our R&D department is developing new what?" Morrison interrupted. "Everything we develop, Carter somehow anticipates and counters. It's like they're reading our playbook." Emma, seated in a corner behind Andrew, watched the board members exchange knowing looks. They'd lost faith in him, and everyone knew it. Andrew's hand trembled slightly as he reached for the water. Perhaps a smooth voice came from the doorway. "We should discuss a change in leadership." All heads turned to see Daniel Carter standing there, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit. Emma's heart stopped at the sight of her father, not the modest Walmart manager she'd mocked, but a powerful CEO who commanded attention without effort. "This is a closed meeting," Andrew snarled, standing so quickly his chair toppled backward. "Security. Your security team works for the board now," Morrison said quietly, "as do most of your executive staff. Mr. Carter has made a compelling offer to acquire Sullivan Industries." "You can't do this." Andrew's face purpled with rage. "I have controlling interest." "Had," Daniel corrected, moving into the room. His eyes passed over Emma without acknowledgement. "Your recent stock sell-off to cover personal debts dropped your ownership below 50%. The board has voted to accept my tender offer." Andrew lunged forward, but 2 security guards materialized to restrain him. "You planned this," he spat at Daniel. "You orchestrated everything, the market pressure, the client losses, all of it." "I simply offered better products at better prices," Daniel replied calmly. "Your company's collapse was your own doing. Too focused on luxury and appearances, not enough on innovation and sustainability. Rather like your personal life, I imagine." Emma saw Andrew's expression change, the dangerous look she'd grown to fear. "You think you've won? You have no idea what I'm capable of." "Tell him, Emma. Tell him what his precious daughter has been doing to maintain her lifestyle." All eyes turned to Emma, who shrank into her chair. Daniel's expression remained neutral, but his voice carried an edge of steel. "Miss Sullivan, I suggest you leave. This discussion doesn't concern you." "Miss Sullivan, not Emma, not daughter." The formal dismissal hurt more than any insult could have. "Oh, but it does concern her," Andrew laughed darkly. "Should I tell the board about our special arrangement? How Mommy Dearest looked the other way while—" "That's enough." Daniel's command cut through the room like a blade. "Mr. Sullivan, you're firing wild accusations because you've lost control. It's over. Security will escort you out. The transition team is waiting in the lobby. You can't just throw me out of my own company." "Your company?" Daniel's smile held no warmth. "Check the documents in front of you. Carter Innovations now owns controlling interest in Sullivan Industries. This isn't your company anymore. It's mine." As security dragged Andrew toward the door, he twisted to shout at Emma. "You ungrateful little whore. After everything I did for you and your mother, I'll destroy you both." Emma fled the room in tears. Behind her, she heard Daniel addressing the board. "Ladies and gentlemen, Shall we discuss the future of our combined operations? Across town in Andrew's mansion, Sandra paced nervously. The staff had been acting strangely all morning, ignoring her requests and whispering among themselves. Her credit cards had been declined at breakfast, and Andrew wasn't answering his phone. The front door burst open, and Andrew stormed in, his face contorted with fury. "Pack your things," he snarled at Sandra. "Both of you have an hour to get out." "What? Andrew, what happened?" "What happened?" He grabbed a crystal decanter from the bar and hurled it against the wall. "Your ex-husband happened. That bastard took my company. Everything I built. Gone in a single board meeting." Sandra's mind reeled. "Daniel? But how? Don't play innocent." Andrew advanced on her menacingly. "You probably helped him, didn't you? You and that treacherous daughter of yours, conspiring behind my back." "No." "Andrew, please. We had nothing to do with." His hand shot out, grabbing her throat. "Nothing? You've been nothing but bad luck since the day I took you in. Two worthless parasites living off my money, and now, Mom." Emma burst through the door, then froze at the scene before her. Andrew released Sandra, turning his predatory gaze on Emma. "And here's the other one. Did you enjoy watching your father destroy me today? Was that your plan all along?" "He's not. He didn't even look at me," Emma whispered. "He called me Miss Sullivan." Andrew's laugh was ugly. "Of course he did. You're nothing to him now. Nothing to anyone. Just a spoiled little girl who sold herself for designer clothes and luxury cars." Sandra stumbled to her feet. "We'll leave. Just give us time to pack." "Pack what?" Andrew gestured around wildly. "Everything here belongs to me. The clothes, the jewelry, all of it. Get out now, before I show you exactly what happens to ungrateful whores who betray me." Mother and daughter fled the mansion with only their purses and the clothes on their backs. As they reached the gates, Andrew's voice echoed behind them. "Try calling your precious Daniel for help. See if he'll take in his used goods after everything you did." They stood on the street as evening fell, watching their former life dissolve behind them. Sandra's hand found Emma's, squeezing gently. "What do we do now?" Emma asked, her voice small. Sandra stared at the mansion's gates closing behind them, remembering another house, a modest suburban home where she'd once been truly loved. "We survive," she said quietly. "It's all we can do." Inside his new office at the combined Carter-Sullivan headquarters, Daniel reviewed the acquisition documents. A small TV played financial news in the background, showing Andrew Sullivan's very public meltdown as he was escorted from the building. "Quite a day," Marcus commented from the doorway. "The business world is calling it the takeover of the decade. Sullivan Industries stock has already risen 15% just on the news of new leadership." Daniel nodded, signing the final paper with a flourish. "Have our team start the integration process. I want Sullivan's sustainable energy patents consolidated with our R&D department by the end of the week." "And Sullivan himself?" "The board's evidence of his financial mismanagement and personal misconduct is being forwarded to the SEC." Daniel's voice was clinical, detached. "He won't be running any companies again." Marcus hesitated. "I saw Emma at the meeting. She looked unwell." "Miss Sullivan's personal situation is not my concern." Daniel turned to the window, gazing out at the city skyline. "They made their choice, Marcus. Now they can live with it." As night fell over the city, 3 people in 3 different locations faced their new realities. In his penthouse office, Daniel Carter celebrated his greatest business triumph, knowing his success was built on integrity rather than deception. In a cheap motel room, Sandra and Emma huddled together, their designer clothes and expensive jewelry replaced by fear and regret. And in his mansion, Andrew Sullivan drank himself into a rage, watching security camera footage of his stepdaughter and ex-lover plotting escape. Unaware that his own paranoia had recorded evidence of every crime he'd committed against them, the pieces were set. The endgame was about to begin. 12 years after the betrayal rain pounded against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Daniel Carter's executive office. The city skyline, usually visible for miles, disappeared into sheets of gray. It matched his mood as he reviewed the quarterly projections for Carter Innovation's newest sustainable energy initiative. That a knock at his door pulled his attention from the documents. Jennifer, his executive assistant of 11 years, stood in the doorway, with an unusual expression on her face. "Mr. Carter," she said carefully, "there are 2 people here to see you. They don't have an appointment." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "You know my policy about unscheduled visitors." "Sir, it's—" Jennifer hesitated. "It's your ex-wife and daughter." The room fell silent except for the drumming rain. Daniel's expression remained unchanged, but his hands tightened imperceptibly on his desk. "Send them away." "There." Jennifer lowered her voice. "They look desperate, sir. Mrs. Sullivan has a black eye, and Miss Sullivan seems unwell." Daniel stood, buttoning his suit jacket with deliberate slowness. "Show them in." "And Jennifer? Call security. Have them wait outside." Sandra and Emma shuffled into his office, a stark contrast to their last encounter. Gone were the designer clothes and arrogant postures. Sandra's expensive highlights had grown out, revealing gray roots. A dark bruise bloomed around her left eye. Emma, once proudly fashionable, wore worn jeans and a baggy sweater that couldn't hide how thin she'd become. "Daniel," Sandra's voice cracked. "Please, we need your help." He studied them without speaking, noting every detail of their fall from luxury. Sandra's hands trembled as she clutched a battered purse. Emma couldn't meet his eyes, her gaze fixed on the plush carpet that probably cost more than their current worldly possessions. "Why are you here?" His voice was cool, professional, the same tone he used in hostile takeover negotiations. "Andrew." Sandra swallowed hard. "After you took over the company, he changed. The drinking got worse. The violence was always there." Emma interrupted, finally looking up. "You just ignored it, Mom. Like you ignored everything else he did." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I'm a busy man. If you've come to complain about Sullivan's drinking habits, he's going to kill us." Emma's words cut through the air like a blade. "He's completely lost it. The SEC investigation, the criminal charges, losing everything, he blames us. Says we conspired with you to destroy him." "Did you?" "No." Sandra stepped forward, then froze as Daniel's hand moved toward the security button. "We had nothing to do with it. But he doesn't believe us. He's been keeping videos, surveillance footage of everything. The abuse, the threats, the things he made Emma." Her voice broke. Emma pulled a USB drive from her pocket with shaking fingers. "It's all here. Everything he did to us. Every crime. Every manipulation. Medical records, photographs, videos from his security cameras. Proof that he forced himself on me, threatened to cut us off if I didn't." Daniel's expression didn't change, but something dark flickered in his eyes. "And you want me to do what, exactly?" "Help us expose him," Sandra pleaded. "Your lawyers, your connections, you could make sure he pays for what he did. He's already under investigation for financial crimes. This would bury him. The way you tried to bury me?" Daniel's voice was dangerously soft. "The way you mocked me, betrayed me, threw away 20 years of marriage for his money and status." "Dad, please." Emma's voice cracked on the word. "I know he hurt you. What we did was unforgivable. But you're not like him. You're a good man, you always were. We were too blind and stupid to see it." "Blind? Stupid?" Daniel laughed without humor. "No. You were greedy. Selfish. You made your choices with clear eyes, knowing exactly what you were doing." He moved around his desk, towering over them. Gone was any trace of the modest Walmart manager they'd once ridiculed. This Daniel Carter radiated power and authority, his success built on the ashes of their betrayal. "When you left," he continued, each word precise and cutting, "you said I wasn't good enough. You called me a loser, an embarrassment. Emma, you told me I'd never be enough for you. That Andrew could give you the life you deserved." "I was wrong," Emma whispered. "So terribly wrong." "Yes," Daniel agreed coldly. "You were. And now that your chosen life has fallen apart, you come crawling back expecting what? Forgiveness? Protection? Money?" Sandra stepped forward, her bruised face wet with tears. "We don't expect forgiveness. We don't deserve it. But please, Daniel, if you ever loved us at all, help us stop him. Not for us, but because it's the right thing to do." Daniel picked up the USB drive, turning it over in his hands. "You made your choices," he repeated, his voice hard. "And now you have to live with them." "Security!" 2 guards appeared instantly in the doorway. "Escort these women out," Daniel ordered. "They're not to be allowed in the building again." "Dad, wait!" Emma's desperate cry stopped him as he turned away. "The videos at least look at them. You don't have to help us, but Andrew needs to be stopped. He's a monster, and we have proof." Daniel slipped the USB drive into his pocket without looking at them. "You supported your mother when she betrayed me," he said quietly. "You helped ruin my life. Why should I care about yours now?" "Because you're better than we are," Emma whispered as the guards moved toward them. "Because you know the difference between revenge and justice." The guards led them away, their soft sobs echoing down the hallway. Daniel stood at his window, watching until they emerged onto the rain-soaked street below. Their figures looked small and broken, huddling together against the storm, a far cry from the proud, cruel women who had walked out of his life 12 years ago. The USB drive felt heavy in his pocket. Behind him, Jennifer cleared her throat softly. "Sir, your 3 o'clock is waiting." Daniel turned from the window, his face unreadable. "Cancel my appointments for the rest of the day. And give me everything we have on Andrew Sullivan's current activities. Every detail, no matter how small." "Of course, sir." Jennifer paused at the door. "If you don't mind my asking, are you going to help them?" Daniel's laugh held no warmth. "Help them? No. But Sullivan's crimes can't go unpunished. Justice doesn't care about personal vendettas." As Jennifer left, Daniel plugged the USB drive into his computer. The files began to load, hundreds of videos, documents, and images. His expression darkened with each click, each revelation of Andrew Sullivan's true nature. By nightfall, he had seen enough. It was time for the final act of this tragedy to begin. The private screening room fell silent as the last video ended. Daniel stood at the front, watching the assembled group process what they'd seen. District Attorney Monica Reynolds sat with her hands clenched into fists. 2 FBI agents exchanged grim looks. Marcus Williams looked physically ill. "There's more," Daniel said quietly. "But I think you've seen enough to understand what kind of man Andrew Sullivan really is." "This is—" Monica cleared her throat. "Mr. Carter, this evidence is explosive. The domestic violence, the sexual coercion, the blackmail combined with the SEC violations we're already investigating. He'll go away for decades," Agent Thompson finished. "But we need your ex-wife and daughter to testify. Their statements, combined with this footage, they'll testify." Daniel's voice was certain. "They have nothing left to lose." Marcus stepped forward. "Daniel, I have to ask, why didn't they come forward sooner?" "Fear. Shame. The same reasons most victims stay silent." Daniel's expression hardened. "And before you ask, no, this isn't about revenge. This is about justice. Given your history with Sullivan," Monica said carefully, "we'll need to handle this delicately. The defense will claim you orchestrated this as revenge for—" "For what?" Daniel cut her off. "For stealing my wife? They weren't stolen. They chose him. But what he did after that, the abuse, the exploitation, the crimes, that's what we're here to address." The door opened, and Jennifer entered with a tablet. "Sir, it's done. Every major news outlet has the footage. Social media is exploding. Sullivan Industries stock has been suspended from trading." Daniel nodded. "And Sullivan himself?" "Barricaded in his mansion. He's been posting increasingly erratic threats online. Local police are monitoring the situation." "Good." Daniel turned to the law enforcement officials. "I assume you have what you need to move forward?" Monica stood, straightening her jacket. "Arrest warrants are being prepared as we speak." "Mr. Carter, what about your ex-wife and daughter? Do you know where they are?" "A women's shelter downtown," Daniel replied without emotion. "They've been there since leaving my office yesterday." "They could have died at his hands," Marcus said quietly. "If they hadn't come to you, they made their choices." Daniel repeated his earlier words. "I'm not their savior. I'm just making sure a criminal faces justice." Across town, in a sparse room at New Beginnings Women's Shelter, Sandra and Emma huddled around a small TV. The breaking news coverage was everywhere: security footage showing Andrew's abuse, financial records detailing his crimes, medical reports documenting injuries. "He actually did it," Emma whispered. "Dad exposed everything." Sandra touched her bruised face. "Not for us. He made that clear. Does it matter why he did it?" Andrew's finished. "Everyone knows the truth now." Before Sandra could respond, the shelter's director knocked on their door. Ladies, there are some people here who need to speak with you. FBI agents and the district attorney's office. Hours later, after giving their statements, mother and daughter sat in the shelter's small garden. The evening news played on someone's phone nearby, broadcasting Andrew Sullivan's dramatic arrest. He'd tried to flee in his private jet, only to find his pilots had already been contacted by the FBI. What do we do now? Emma asked, her voice small. Sandra watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. We tell the truth. About everything. No matter how much it hurts. Mom. Emma hesitated. What we did to Dad. We can never make that right, can we? No. Sandra's voice cracked. Some betrayals can't be forgiven. We threw away a good man's love for a monster's empty promises. That's something we'll have to live with. Back in his office, Daniel watched the same news coverage. Andrew's face, contorted with rage as he was led away in handcuffs, filled the screen. The ticker below showed Sullivan Industries' stock price in freefall. Years of criminal behavior finally exposed. Sir? Jennifer appeared in the doorway. Ms. Reynolds called. They'll need you to testify about when Mrs. Sullivan and Miss Carter came to you with the evidence. Mrs. Sullivan and Miss Sullivan. Daniel corrected automatically. They lost the right to those names 12 years ago. Jennifer hesitated. The shelter director also called. They're being evicted next week. The building was owned by one of Sullivan's shell companies. It's being seized as part of the investigation. Daniel's jaw tightened. Have our foundation by the building. The shelter does good work. They shouldn't suffer for Sullivan's crimes. And Mrs. Sullivan and her daughter. That's not my concern. Daniel turned back to his work, his tone final. Later that night, alone in his penthouse apartment, Daniel poured himself a single glass of whiskey. The city lights sparkled below, a testament to how far he'd come from that suburban house where his life had imploded. His phone buzzed a text from Emma. Thank you for exposing him. We'll tell the whole truth in court, no matter what it costs us. You were always the better man. I'm sorry it took losing everything to see that. Daniel deleted the message without responding. On his TV, the news showed Andrew Sullivan's mansion being raided by FBI agents. In his study, they found more videos, more evidence of his crimes. The commentators speculated on how many years he'd serve, how many millions he'd forfeit, how far the mighty had fallen. Justice, it seemed, had a sense of poetry, but as Daniel watched his former rival's empire crumble, he felt no satisfaction, no joy. Only a cold certainty that right had prevailed, not through revenge, but through the simple exposure of truth. Sandra and Emma would testify. Andrew would face punishment for his crimes. The world would know the full story of the great Andrew Sullivan's fall from grace, and Daniel Carter would continue building his legacy, not on the ashes of revenge, but on the foundation of his own integrity. The courthouse steps swarmed with reporters as Daniel made his way inside. 6 months had passed since Andrew Sullivan's arrest, and today marked the final day of testimony in his criminal trial. The media had dubbed it the case of the decade, a sordid tale of power, abuse, and corruption that had captivated the nation. Mr. Carter, reporters thrust microphones toward him. How do you feel about your ex-wife's testimony yesterday? Any comment on Andrew Sullivan's threats against you during his outburst? Daniel pushed through the crowd without responding, Marcus falling in a step beside him. You don't have to be here today, Marcus said quietly. The prosecution has more than enough evidence without. I need to see this through. Daniel cut him off. Not for them. For justice. Inside the courtroom, Andrew Sullivan sat at the defense table, his designer suits replaced by prison orange, his once commanding presence diminished by months in custody. He glared at Daniel with undisguised hatred. Sandra and Emma occupied a bench near the front, both wearing simple, dark clothing, a far cry from their days of designer labels. Emma's hands trembled as she gripped a manila envelope. The judge entered, and the proceedings began. Emma took the stand one final time, her voice stronger than it had been during her initial testimony. The defense has questioned the timing of these allegations, the prosecutor began. Can you explain why you waited so long to come forward? Emma's eyes found Daniel's for a moment before focusing on the prosecutor. Fear. Shame. Andrew controlled everything, our money, our housing, our entire lives. He made it clear what would happen if we ever betrayed him. And what finally made you decide to act? He was spiraling after losing his company. The abuse got worse. I knew he would eventually kill us. Emma's voice cracked. We had nowhere else to turn. My father, Mr. Carter, was the only person powerful enough to help expose the truth. Even though you had betrayed him years before? Objection. Andrew's lawyer jumped up. Relevance? Goes to credibility, Your Honor, the prosecutor countered. The defense has suggested this is all an elaborate revenge plot. Overruled. The witness may answer. Emma's eyes filled with tears. We destroyed my father's life. Mocked him. Threw away his love for Andrew's money and status. We didn't deserve his help. But he did it anyway, not for us, but because it was right. Andrew surged to his feet. Lying bitch. After everything I gave you. Order. The judge's gavel cracked like a gunshot. Mr. Sullivan, control yourself, or you'll be removed. The day continued with a parade of final witnesses, financial experts detailing Andrew's crimes, doctors documenting abuse patterns, FBI agents explaining the surveillance footage. Through it all, Daniel sat motionless, his face an unreadable mask. Finally, Emma approached the bench with a manila envelope. Your Honor, I have one final piece of evidence. Videos Andrew recorded himself, bragging about his crimes to his business associates. He liked to show off his power over us. The courtroom fell silent as the videos played. Andrew's voice filled the room, drunk and boasting about breaking his stepdaughter, about keeping Sandra in line through fear, about destroying anyone who crossed him. When it was over, Andrew lunged across the defense table, screaming threats. Deputies tackled him as he tried to reach Emma. I'll kill you, he howled as they dragged him away. You're nothing without me. Nothing. The judge called a recess. In the hallway, Sandra approached Daniel hesitantly. You didn't have to come today, she said softly. Yes, I did. Daniel's voice was neutral. Justice needs witnesses. Daniel. Sandra twisted her hands together. What we did to you, there's no excuse. But thank you for helping stop him, for doing what we were too weak to do ourselves. I didn't do it for you. We know. Emma joined them, her face pale but composed. You did it because it was right. Because you're the man we should have valued all along. Daniel studied them both. The ex-wife who had mocked his honest work, the daughter who had called him a loser. Their designer clothes and arrogant sneers were gone, replaced by genuine remorse. But some bridges once burned could never be rebuilt. The DA thinks Sullivan will get 30 years, he said finally. The fines and forfeitures will take everything he has left. You'll both need to testify at the sentencing hearing next month. Where do we go from here? Emma asked quietly. That's not my concern. Daniel straightened his tie. You made your choices 12 years ago. Now you'll make new ones, without Sullivan's money or influence. Without my help? Dad, don't. Daniel's voice was sharp. That word, that relationship, you threw it away. I've done what needed to be done. Andrew Sullivan will face justice. But that doesn't change the past. It doesn't erase your betrayal. He turned to leave, then paused. The shelter's new ownership will let you stay another month. After that, you're on your own. Consider it your fresh start. We don't deserve even that much kindness, Sandra whispered. No, Daniel agreed. You don't. But letting you end up homeless won't undo what you did. Just remember everything you're facing now. These are the consequences of your choices, not Andrew's crimes. He walked away without looking back, leaving them standing in the courthouse hallway. Outside, the media frenzy continued, but Daniel slipped out a side entrance where his car waited. Back to the office, his driver asked. No. Daniel watched the courthouse recede in his mirror. Take me to the Carter Innovation Foundation. We're breaking ground on the new domestic violence center today. Months later, Daniel stood at his office window, reading the morning headlines. Andrew Sullivan had been sentenced to 35 years in prison. His empire was dismantled, his assets seized, his name synonymous with corruption and abuse. That a small note at the bottom of the article mentioned that Sandra was working as a waitress at a local diner. Emma had enrolled in community college, working part-time to pay her tuition. They shared a small apartment. Rebuilding their lives from scratch, Daniel set down the paper and turned to his desk, where plans for Carter Innovations' newest sustainable energy project awaited his review. He had built something lasting, something meaningful, not to prove others wrong, but to prove himself right. The betrayal that could have destroyed him had instead forged him into something stronger. Not through bitterness or revenge, but through the simple power of rising above those who had tried to break him. Daniel Carter had won, not by destroying his enemies, but by refusing to let them destroy him.